Hillsong Creative Podcast, where we hear from creative experts, influencers, dreamers, and doers what they've learned and what we can learn from their journey as we explore, respond, and create.
Hey, well, welcome back. It's Rich Langton here, back for another episode. One I'm pretty excited about. We have someone from our own team here at Hillsong Creative. If you've ever wondered if a DJ can become a production guru, oversight, leader person, then you've come to the right place because, yes, a DJ can do that. You'll hear in Mush's story, Muchiri Gateri, who we're about to interview, that he came to Australia to do Bible college at Hillsong College. But when he came, he was a DJ. He found then, over time, that I guess the DJ life wasn't actually for him and that God had other things for him. So in this interview, we talk about life, leadership, and where God might take you, being open-handed, caring for people, and even how being a production person or a person behind the scenes doesn't mean you can't be a people person. So I think you'll enjoy this one. We'll jump straight into it. And don't forget to hang around afterwards because we're going to answer some more of your questions. And I hope you're enjoying that. If you are enjoying us answering your questions, please let us know on our Instagram or by rating the podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps us, gives us good feedback, and it lets people know that the podcast is worth listening to. So anyway, we'll jump straight in now. We'll talk to you afterwards. Well, I'm here in the creative offices at Hillsong Church, and I have a very special guest with us today. It's Muchiri Gateri. Mush, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, wow, I'm a guest, guys.
Yeah.
This is great. Great
now,
to be here.
That was very formal.
I know.
You as we've talked about, before we started recording, you interviewed me some time back, but now I get my own back.
I know. I feel like I'm back. I think, it did happen, which was very nerve-wracking, and this may even be more nerve-wracking, having you now ask me the questions.
No, it's going to be fun. I think for the people listening at home, let them know, I guess, who you are and what role you play here at Hillsong Church.
So my name's, like Rich said, is Muchiri Gateri. I'm part of our creative team here in Sydney, Australia. I look after our team across our creative technology team, also known as production teams, depending on where you are and what your department chooses to call them. But yeah, I look after our teams across the country. I've been in this role now for about maybe 3.5, maybe 4 years, coming up to 4 years now. Yeah.
How long have you been at Hillsong Church?
Including my college career, I showed up in 2003. So that's 15 years, coming up to 16 by May 2019.
So you've been here 15 or so years, but Australia wasn't where you grew up.
No, exactly. My first 21 years were lived in Nairobi, Kenya.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then how did you get here?
Okay, short story is, yes, so I was introduced to the music back home by a missionary family.
Because you're a musician?
Well, at the time I wasn't. I was a DJ.
Okay.
So I guess, I don't know, is that class as a musician? I'm not sure. Maybe it is.
I don't know. We can put it out there to the listeners.
Yeah, let's take a poll. But yeah, so I got saved at 1999. And so as I was kind of doing the whole cell group life thing and all that, I was introduced to the music, got to see a few videos, was quite intrigued that a church would be doing, music and worship at that level. That was quite intriguing. I'm fairly technical minded and all that. So I quite intrigued, and it's like, man, it'd be kind of cool to see how that all comes together. But never really thought I would ever get to. It's just one of those things you go, oh, that'd be amazing if.
Right.
Anyway, so left it and all that. But my cell group leader at the time challenged me to actually think and pursue it and actually entertain the thought of potentially even, going across to Sydney, Australia. Then in amongst all those conversations, I found out there was a college here.
Right.
So then it's like, but I was still very skeptical. I was still very like, oh, no way, too expensive, too far, too complicated, too everything. So I just left it on the side. But they kept pestering me in the nicest of ways. Fast forward, decided to they said, just check with your parents, just have the conversation and just to get them off my back. I said, okay, fine. In my mind, me asking my dad for this was, might as well tell you now, it's a no.
Right.
So I just did it to get him off my back.
A no because it would be too expensive or?
Too expensive. It's
too far away.
Too far away. And the whole idea of going to do Bible college the other side of the world did not quite appeal to where our family was at the time.
Right. So
in my mind, I was like, I'll do this to get you off my back, as this is a cell group leader now. So I'll do this to get you off my back, and and we can end this and keep going.
Right.
Quick catch is, I did ask the question, and my dad goes, "Tell me more," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right, didn't expect that, so I did. And honestly, with what felt like a miraculous sequence of events, that he entertained the idea. In the next short period of time, he was asking me questions about how much does it cost, when do you want to go.
Right.
I'm like, so now we're really having a conversation about this potentially happening. And so fast forward that, I'm walking into immigration offices, I'm arranging passports and visas and everything else, and one thing leads to the other. And I think in about a year or so, 6 months to about a year, I had tickets, I had a visa, fees were paid, and I was making my way to Australia.
And how old were you?
I was 21 at the time.
Okay, so not super young, but pretty young.
Pretty young, yeah.
And so you're a DJ.
I say that, yeah, yes, yeah.
Somewhat of a DJ, let's say that.
Yes.
And you heard about Hillsong Church, the music.
Yeah.
And then Bible college. What did you expect would happen when you got here, or like once you'd done college?
I don't think I had that much foresight, to be honest with you. I think I was very more like, because I had not entertained the idea of this ever being a possibility, then I had never formulated an idea of what I wanted to look like.
Right.
My story is one of just walking through the doors God has opened. I'm not entirely sure I've had a grand plan of what I wanted my life to look like in terms of 10 years, in terms of the activity of my life. But I've always felt like God has opened doors and I've just stepped into them. And that's really, even just since showing up here in 2003, that's really been the journey for the last 15, 16 years or so. It's really just the open door is the one I've stepped into, and 16 years later, I'm still doing this. The one thing that I feel like maybe I do know for a fact is I want to be in his house doing something and adding value to what we're about and perpetuating what the church is all about.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds fairly like, oh yeah, that's a great textbook answer, but it really is. Like, that's the one thing that I feel like has never deviated, because I have held fairly different responsibilities all within our team in creative, but fairly different. And at any point in time, I've never felt like one each of those were the be all and end all. I've always been able to go, okay, well, I'm here now, but I feel like there's a need there. Nobody else, so okay, I'll go and see what I can do.
Right. So you didn't ever think, you're in Nairobi thinking, if I could just get to Australia and one day I could maybe head up the production team, or...
No way. No, I didn't. No way. Even just hearing you say that, in terms of like, not in a single moment did I ever think that, let alone, see, I even doubted the fact that I could even be in the country to even see this firsthand,
right.
Let alone being a student here, let alone being on staff, let alone being, one of a team, or one of our leaders here, let alone 15 years later, and the position I hold now. It's, none of that has been aspirational for me in terms of I want that. It's just been more going, I love what this place is about. I deeply do. I love our team. The rest is as needed.
So there's probably people listening even now in Nairobi, like almost like a young Muchiri.
Yeah, that's right.
What advice would you give to them about pursuing dreams versus just being faithful or going through the doors that God opens?
I think the biggest thing, honestly, is understanding that this desire we have to be able to see our lives amount to something and our lives to do something, God's desire to see that happen is actually way, way, way greater than our desire. I feel like sometimes we care about our future more than we think God cares about it. And so that's why sometimes we feel like we need to get in the driver's seat and make something happen. Now, I'm not negating any need for effort and activity and work and everything else, and being able to have take responsibility for yourself, but understanding at the end of the day, God cares about you getting to where he wants you to go than you do. And that in itself there, if you understand that, then you can go about the daily activity of your life and trust that God can direct you, and the doors that open will open because God wants them open.
Yeah.
And yours is to keep yourself faithful where you are. You don't graduate from that. This story that God is writing of your life, he's writing it, and he cares about the storyline even more than you do. So I feel like if you're going to put any effort in, put effort into making the most of where you are now and what he's given you. And the rest, honestly, God will actually bring to pass in his time and in his fashion. So
the way you talk, it doesn't sound like your average production person. I've met lots of production people. Perhaps the people listening know what I'm talking about. What makes you different? Are you different?
Yes, and that's my that would be my question. Am I? Like, I don't know. Like, because I'm not sure that it's it's a point of difference that I've necessarily attempted to make. I think doing this faith walk, take away what I do and my responsibilities, doing the faith walk and being someone who actually is a Christian and a follower of Christ, I think it does that to you. And I think the expression doesn't define me. In other words, my role doesn't necessarily define me. And I've tried as much as I can through all the years to be able to keep the things that need to be front and center. But that's, again, the production side of things is an expression. It's not me. As in, I guess what people would see day to day and week to week, it's fine, it's what's needed. But that's not that's not the basis of who I am. All that expression sits on a foundation of being a Christ follower, hopefully being a good father, and hopefully being a good husband, and hopefully being a good friend. And the expression of that, and if that's sitting in a good place, then I can come and take on my responsibilities on this team and hopefully deliver something that's actually worth delivering. This is where I feel like some of the guys around our world can get it wrong, is that the expression becomes the be-all and end-all of life in the production world, because the outcomes are so measurable, the outcomes are so apparent, and the outcomes are so, quantifiable, that there's every chance that somebody will quiz you and question you on your outcome, but there's a very little chance that somebody will come and quiz you and question you on your fatherhood and how you are as a husband or as a Christ follower.
Right.
Now, we should, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying the way life happens and the pace of life, the pace of church life, we will measure a service, and that's fine. But if we stop at that, then I think we teach our people to then only deliver at this level, because that's all we seem to be able to want to measure. And like I said, I think, I don't know if I said this before, but I feel like there's times again, time and time again, I've come to a place where I know I haven't been enough. As good or as I may think I am, I have not been enough. And in those moments, there's been, I guess, forks in the road of going, is it a question of just trying harder? Or is it a question of actually digging deep and allowing God to actually do something in me and then do something through me in His power? Yeah, that I've asked that question so many times, but I feel like you almost need to get to that place repeatedly to remind yourself that you're never going to be enough in and of yourself. And that's okay.
Right.
Again, we've heard this before. We're not building this church. We're putting activity, but He builds the church. And this activity that I'm putting in is great, and He will take it and He'll use it. But it's actually not the linchpin, or it's actually not the difference maker here. But I think sometimes we do need to be reminded every so often that, hey, do your bit, deliver what you need to deliver, be diligent, because that is part of the expectation and part of being on this team and being a Christian is you do exemplify these qualities that make you a great leader and make you a great team member. By the end of the day, never forget that this is actually something that He's building and not you. So that gap is always, for me, I feel like that gap is always crucial, and I almost feel like I never want it to go away because it keeps me on the straight and narrow.
Right. So I understand that Christ builds the church.
Yeah.
But then how do you stop from feeling like your contribution is not even
necessary?
Well, yeah. How do you feel like it's valuable to contribute if it's all about Christ building the church?
That's interesting, because I don't know. I think God's fashion has always been through people. I do feel my contribution is valuable, but only because of what He then does with it. Not in and of itself.
Right.
In and of itself, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it makes some level of impact, but to bring the level of impact that is needed to have our life that's meaningful and a life that actually impacts other lives, it's not my activity that actually does that. It's what He does with my activity. So yes, I will work hard. I will bring this and I'll do my best, failing here and winning there, failing here. That's all fine. But I think it's what He then does with that.
Right.
His way has always been people, and I think always will be people, which is why He put the church was instituted as the I guess in a sense the agent of change for throughout the ages since the first church back then. So there's a reason why that happened. He could have chosen any other way, in any other way to bring humanity back to Him and everything else, and do all the restoration work that He's done.
Yep.
But He chose the church and He chose people. So for me, that's me in whatever sphere of influence and life I have.
I think that's a good opportunity to maybe segue a little bit into talking about teams.
Yeah, right.
And leading teams, particularly of production teams.
Yeah.
We call them creative technology.
Yeah, that's right.
My perception of perhaps a lot of production teams is that their leader is the very best technical person they have, How do you perceive that you're different to that, or our team is set up perhaps a little bit different to that?
Firstly, I am well aware that I'm not the best at any of the things we are responsible for. Even though, interestingly, I do wear the responsibility, like I am answerable to yourself and to Cass and a few other people for the outcomes, but I am not, the best at any of those things. The way I would perceive my responsibility on this team in that regard is I'm responsible for being able to lead a team that can deliver those outcomes.
Right.
So in other words, from your end, as the person I'm accountable for, I'm responsible for making sure that I understand what your expectations are and where we're going as a team and what we're responsible for. Then flip that aside, and when I turn back and look at my team, I want to make sure that those things that I've taken, in that understanding that I hopefully have, I've then taken back and I've actually communicated that to the team, and they understand and they're equipped for it, and they're prepared for it. And they understand that that's what we need to deliver, and keeping them focused on the right thing. And even from a technical point of view, do they have everything they need to do to deliver the outcomes that have been expected of them? That's the dynamic that I feel like I have right now, where I sit between understanding what we're about from a big picture perspective, and then taking that and hopefully being able to articulate that to a team that is technical on the ground.
Yeah. So then how do you go from being a technical person to being a more leadership-focused person?
It's not accidental, for starters.
Right.
I mean, I'm just being honest. Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't just happen. I feel like you've got to, it's got to be a deliberate decision to go, hang on. The growth that we're seeing here, the progress that we're trying to see, the expansion, everything else that seems to be make up the ethos of who we are here. It needs me to be this. It needs me to be that. For me, as I grew and as our church grew and as I became more and more aware of what we're about, it became really apparent that maybe my biggest contribution right now is not necessarily to be a much better monitor guy, engineer. I could do it. But maybe what Cass and Rich need right now, maybe what Brian needs right now is a leader who can take a group of 10 monitor guys, right? Equip them. First of all, I guess in a sense, gather them, equip them, and deploy them back to do what they're called to do. Because as good as I am, I'm only ever going to do one mix in one location for one service at a time. So maybe I need to be able to step back a bit, give 5 other people the chance to be able to do the same growth journey that I've had, because after that, then we can do 5 services. How good is that? And that's growth. But that was a very deliberate realization that I didn't just need to work harder at that thing. I needed to change where my effort was going. And so my effort wasn't necessarily in bettering my skills. My effort was in more about gathering people and developing them and deploying them.
Right.
But that was a very deliberate decision, which did not come easily, because I did try to just work harder and do more. And at some point I went, no, it's actually not going to work.
Yeah. Which I think we should talk about in a minute, but I have a question first.
Yeah, go.
How do you not hold on to the value of the position then? So someone's a doer and they're good at it.
Yeah,
and so
right.
they're being elevated, they're being given opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, how do they give that position up in order to perhaps give someone else an opportunity and then not feel like they're losing their value?
I think you have that conversation before you have to make the decision to let it go. In other words, so we're talking about me potentially getting to a place of realization that me being the one person is not enough, right?
Right.
I would argue that conversation or that decision or that whatever it is needs to happen at the onset of my introduction to team.
Right.
So on day one, when I show up as a monitor guy or as a front of house guy or as a lighting guy, hopefully my leader sets that tone, that benchmark from day one, going, hey, I love that you're here. And I love the skills that you'll bring, and the skills you bring now, and the skills that you will continue to bring as you grow. In parallel to all that, it is paramount that you understand that the roles that we hold here are not ours to hold. We're here to grow and to serve whatever vision it is that we have here. At that point, it looks like developing people is as much a value as it is you becoming better. Because I think if that doesn't happen at the onset, trying to shoehorn that in at 5 years down the line when somebody has really ingrained themselves into a team, right? And now you're trying to say, hey, by the way, what you should be doing also is making room for the next guy and training them.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's a lot harder to be able to try and, in a sense, retract or undo 5 years worth of a certain trajectory and a certain momentum and a certain direction to try and say, I know I should have told you this at the onset, but maybe you should think about developing somebody else.
Right. But did you always think that you would move on from monitors engineering?
I didn't think I'd always will, which is why I said before, I think it had to be a very deliberate thing when I realized that hang on, maybe what's needed of me now is not what I think maybe not what I've been doing for the last 5 years.
Right.
So I didn't think about it all the time, but in the back of my mind, I always knew that this could be different tomorrow.
Right.
It could be, or the reality is I could still be 15 years worth of doing monitors, and that's fine too, if that's what was needed. But for me, I think I always understood that what I'm doing now may not be what I'm doing tomorrow. And that's okay. But it's here now, so I'll do it now. And then when tomorrow comes, I'll do that as well.
Yeah.
Now, that was not necessarily, that was ingrained in me from the very initial start of when I showed up. In other words, I knew that the role I played was more of an expression as opposed to who I was. So, and again, I'm wired this way as well, so I guess maybe I'm predispositioned to think this way.
Right.
But I go where the need is, and I meet the need. So you and Cass could tell me tomorrow that we actually need to go this way, and that's fine. I will go there because I really haven't cared too much about the actual expression of it.
Right.
But I think that's a cultural value that I feel like needs to be ingrained in our team from the onset. So the kind of things that become very difficult when you try and, in a sense, graft them into someone who has a pre-established way of thinking and functioning on a team.
Yes.
5 years into their service or 2 years into their service.
Right, I understand. And then there's the aspect of perhaps a role grows to the point where you're finding maybe you can't do it all, and therefore you perhaps need some other people who need to develop some other people. How do you keep going, I suppose is the question. How do you keep going when a role gets too big for you? What do you do?
That is a very real conversation right now. That is definitely not a hypothetical question. No, serious. Not being honest. I'm being honest because that's, in a sense, that's sort of where I am. I've been in this position with different levels of intensity over the years. Never been where I'm at now without question. But I am sort of in that season now where I'm trying to work out. There's a direction we're going in, and there's a growth that's sparked by that, vision and everything else. I think what happens is I've found that I've got to be able to stop for a moment and actually define what's actually required of me. What do I need to grow in to be able to then meet the need of what the role requires?
Right.
I feel like sometimes we just skate through life from one thing to the other, and life happens, and there's no stock take. So the role has grown, and that's great. But I haven't done the homework of stopping and understanding what the role requires of me, which then means I haven't taken the time to then respond to that and grow in the areas that are needed to be able to do the role.
Right.
So, so this whole idea of riding on the momentum of life as a leader is actually a little bit dangerous. I know we love the momentum because it's progress. But if that's all that's triggering the progress of your life, that's a bit dangerous because you never take time to stop and actually assess where you're at in relation to the role. And I'll be honest with you, I've done that before where the role has kind of grown. We live in a very high-paced church here, and there's momentum and there's growth and there's expectation. And it's all the things that we love about our church. But those things are a two-edged sword if we don't deal with them properly. In this case, like I'm saying, it's being able to stop and assess and saying, amazing. After I've high-fived you about the progress and growth, I need to stop and find out what my response to that growth needs to be.
Right.
Before I just dive in and do more stuff. Maybe the efforts I need to be putting in are not necessarily the efforts I was putting in yesterday.
Right. So then what's the responsibility of the individual versus the team, or it could be in a church or it could be in a work environment. If someone's feeling like they can't carry it, they can't keep going, where does the onus lie?
Right. Very boring answer, but it lies in both camps, really. Like if I'm leading a team, right, and the person, like if the person reporting to me is at that place or about to get to the place of just putting their hand up and saying, I'm done, it's enough, too much, moving on or whatever.
Yeah.
First of all, how aware have I been of their journey and their journey to this place? Second part of that question is, I would like to know what that person individually has been doing on their way to this place. I think awareness is at the forefront of leadership because awareness then helps me make the right decisions and respond correctly. So the whole that whole idea, it's both people are responsible. The individual is responsible, but as their leader, I'm also responsible for asking them the questions that maybe nobody else will. Because burnout is not necessarily about a job. Right. Generally, the way things go with these things is that there is a collapse on a few different other fronts, and it all culminates in one place, and we call it burnout. So it's not the job, yes, might legitimately being too much, but I can guarantee there have been other components of their world that have probably haven't been upheld or haven't been in a good place. So I guess as a leader, I'm asking the questions and I'm staying in tune with where the teams are at, and nothing's necessarily catching me by surprise, so to speak.
Right.
And so if somebody's on their way to this place and hopefully I can see it from a mile away. And yes, while I may not be able to do everything for them, I'm going to ask the questions and hopefully trigger the right responses. So yes, it is avoidable, but at the same time, I understand that no one, but as a leader, maybe I need to change the circumstances they work in. Maybe that is a legitimate concern,
right?
And that is probably true. But there's also the question about what they're doing on their own and what kind of measures they're taking to be able to live a healthy life.
We've talked lots about vitality as part of our creative compass.
Right.
And I know that there's things that you've put in place in your life that I guess from a personal perspective you've needed to do in order to refresh yourself and keep, I guess, centered.
Yeah.
Tell us about that and that journey.
Yeah. Without taking too much time, end of 2015 was the best of times, was the worst of times, right?
Right.
Like progress. I was seeing my role was changing and everything else. There was more responsibility being, in a sense, awarded to me because I had been faithful with whatever was given to me. And that was great. But at the same time, on the inside and the rest of my world had been slowly kind of, in a sense, been caving in a little bit. At the time, I hadn't done the homework to be able to make sure that I was actually doing what it's supposed to do. So for me, really practically speaking, after that point in time, I came back, and this is fairly common for most people, but I decided to look after myself. I began riding a bike to get myself healthy. I began eating real food. I read a book, and I made a friend. Now, there's nothing grand and nothing new about that. I'm sure we've all heard it in some shape, way, or form. But that formed the basis of me getting back to a place where I actually could sustain the expectation and sustain the effort that was needed based on the expectation that was put on me. So I ride my bike 5 out of 7 mornings a week. I'm up at 4:30 in the morning. I'm up riding my bike for about an hour and a half or so, back home, do breakfast with the family, then get ready for work, come do a day's work, head back home, do dinner, spend time with the kids. But that's the thing. It's interesting that the grand revelation going from the place of just barely keeping up with things to being in a place where I feel like it's a stretch, but it's a stretch that I'm actually welcoming. It wasn't anything grand necessarily. It's doing the things we all know to do. I once got told that sometimes we don't necessarily need more instructing, we just need more reminding. Right. And if we did the things we know to do, maybe we wouldn't be where we are now. So I didn't do anything new. There wasn't a new revelation. I just did the things that I knew I should have been doing.
Right. Which, I mean, it sounds counterintuitive to you're feeling overwhelmed, but then you've got to add something into life in order to feel less overwhelmed. Because there's different sorts of tired, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And there's a kind of tired that you can fix or remedy by a good night's sleep. And there's a tired that that you carry with you that just weighs you down and just in a sense sucks the life out of you. There's nothing wrong with being tired. I think we spoke about this. It's effort. What we're responsible for is effort. So being tired, we don't shy away from being tired, but hopefully our tiredness is being generated by the right things. And not just a weariness and a sense of defeat and a sense of, being overburdened. That's a different kind of tired and weariness. I think the tired of, I've done a good day's work. I'm actually tired, but I need to go to sleep. That's great. That's what I feel like life should be.
Very good.
We'll get right back to the episode, brought to you by our Hillsong Worship and Creative Conference, which happens in Sydney, Australia. It's for every kind of creative, whether you're a musician, singer, a graphic designer, architect, an audio engineer, or video editor. It's a place for the artists of the church to gather together, to worship, to be inspired and refreshed, and to be equipped and trained for your sphere of creativity. Find out more details at hillsong.com/WCC. Now, let's get back to the episode.
This is Muchiri Gateri, and these are my Fantastic Four. My favorite time of day, without a doubt, is the morning, early morning. A job I'd be terrible at, I think, would be maybe like fashion design or something. Something I believe that maybe the rest of the world might think is insane is that I'm not sure that a lot of our issues as a society are necessarily societal issues as they are individualistic. The title of the current chapter of my life would have to be Hold On, Be Strong, Remember Where Your Strength Comes From, which is the words of the song we're currently singing.
So we have a CT team, a creative technology team, not just a production team. We call it CT.
Yeah.
How is production creative?
I think these days, right? And so especially more nowadays, the world of technology is probably driving creativity more than it ever has.
How so?
So you look, okay, so the products that are being created to then be used in the creative realm are in and of themselves such a creative endeavor. LED screens, let's take those because I feel like that's a fairly common thing now. But that in itself, we appreciate what it gives us and what it enables us to do and the effect it creates, and great. But that in itself, to get it to what it's doing now, before it even gets turned on, the development, the manufacturing and everything else, and the fact that somebody thought to do that is such a creative thing because somebody saw that screen before it was ever turned on.
Right.
Somebody decided to sit back and say, you know what? What if we created a big screen with little LEDs that could be seen in daylight if needed? Wow. And then that existed. And then the creative producer went and said, oh, I could do this with that. And the video editor said, wow, that means now when I have a blackout, I can have a blackout, because when you have projection screens, you still have a big white screen sitting there.
Right.
Now when I have a blackout, I turn the actual screen off and it's a legitimate blackout. I can do so much with that. You know what I mean? So the whole thing is the creative part of it doesn't necessarily get expression on stage, the technological part of it. We see what the screen gives us. But the guy who sat there and imagined this thing long before it ever existed, that is a true creative.
Now, screens are a good example because they're really expensive.
Yeah, yes, they are.
So should every church, or how do you justify such expense?
I feel like with the way you justify, and that's a very good question, because I think what happens sometimes, and I know we've been here before, if I was to be really honest, is that when we cost things up, this is very practical, right? When we're budgets, and whether it's for installs in locations or conferences, it can be done in a silo. Which is, you know what I mean? Because now I can justify why I want to spend X amount, because I want the best of this. And then this is where, again, the leadership comes in, where if I am spending X thousand amount of dollars, or I'm telling my pastor he needs to spend X amount thousand of dollars for a screen because it's amazing and it'll give him this, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Except if I've done that without an understanding of where the greater conference or the greater church project is, then I've missed the point here. Because if, for example, if me convincing my pastor he must have the screen for this, and I could probably make an argument for it, and I can use technological jargon and say, paint all these pictures and make him believe that he must have this. But if I've done that, and that meant that we weren't able to get a kids facility, so which means the kids program has been compromised or anything else. If I don't have that perspective, I feel like I'm doing the church a disservice, which is why, again, going back to the whole idea of a silo, I cannot be functioning in a silo. Otherwise, I will have no context of where the church is at. And maybe I do need to just suck it up a little bit and not get the LED screen that I want. Because why? We get a kids program or facilities that are now allow, or we can buy, I don't know, wheelchairs for the mobility impaired, or you know what I mean, like the perspective. So it's not like it's good or bad, and it's not necessarily there's a blanket answer. It's just that it needs to be done in conjunction with whatever else is happening in church life, and that's a very important component. Yes, we will push forward, hopefully in a creative perspective, but never at the expense of maybe something that's a little bit more important than what we're doing. And hopefully we have that priority in mind.
Right.
I hope so anyway.
Yeah, because it's really easy to get caught up in the new technology or the greatest microphones or the greatest new thing that's happening, and to forget.
That is so real. Yes, that is so true.
I guess particularly in church world, to forget that someone's tithes and offerings are paying for that.
Absolutely.
And so the great screen, sometimes it's not the best thing
Absolutely.
to do.
Correct.
Yeah. Then again, on the flip side, sometimes it is.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's appropriate.
Exactly.
And sometimes the new technology is perhaps cheaper than it used to be, or those sorts of things.
And this is the thing, and being able to be, when you're crafting these sort of things, being able to be future-proofing. Now, you can't really future-proof because everything moves. LED screens will become obsolete one day. We all know that.
Sure.
So if you can make, for example, if I can go to my pastor and say, hey, if you get this LED screen, this cuts our electricity costs by this much. And in 2, 3, 5, 10 years with this, the maintenance costs go down, the electricity costs go down, and the costs, you have those kind of conversations of, it's not just about the product. There's a benefit to this that goes beyond me having a really awesome screen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When we have done this with the lighting in our big auditorium here, where our power bill now, if somebody was to compare the power bill now to what it was about 10 years ago with the first lights we put in, significantly less. What it's done over time, our power bill tells the story, so to speak.
Right.
So there's things like that. But again, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be the transparency and honesty needs to be at the forefront, and the ability to be able to hear no, thank you, and it's okay.
Yeah. I find sometimes with the production area, creative technology, there's a language that you all use that I don't know.
Right, yeah.
And so the relationship between someone like yourself and myself has to be really good and, like you say, honest and truthful.
Yes.
We have to be on the same page.
Absolutely.
Going for the same end goal.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't become, like you said, siloed. There's a department that wants to do something great in their area that costs lots of money that isn't actually going to reap a benefit. And yet, like the flip side of that is that leadership, we have to understand that sometimes the long game is what we're playing.
Yes.
And so a little bit more of a spend now might end up being reaping a reward down the track.
Absolutely.
Shifting gear just again slightly. We would say that the production team are worship leaders just like the person standing on the platform.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how a lighting engineer is a worship leader.
The foundational belief in that is that we are there to, first of all, be aware of the moments that are happening, and then enhance the moments and make sure that we're creating an environment that actually people can engage. That's really it there. Mm-hmm. So when we take time to craft openers for Hillsong Conference, that's one of our largest platforms, that is a collaboration of sonics and visual, and like it's not like we're going for all this as many senses as we can here. That's exactly right. Because we're looking at creating an experience. We're not looking at creating a great mix. We're not looking at creating a great video. We're not looking at creating a great lighting show. We're looking at creating an incredible experience that invites people and sends people on a certain journey to a certain outcome, whatever it is we're trying to say with that experience. And so if I'm a lighting guy, I need to understand that even though, yes, I am responsible to bring my best to the lighting, it's my best in context of, and that means sometimes deferring to the video or deferring to this because the experience is enhanced. That's the conversation we have with our guys going that, man, I want you to be the most amazing lighting guy, always in context of, because you never really do your thing as your thing. It's your thing, but it's your thing amongst everything else.
Yeah. Which is a little bit like the word talks about the church being a body.
Yeah. And
the hand can't function alone. The foot can't function alone. It needs all the parts.
Absolutely.
So in a church service,
exactly right.
We need the lights to be able to see the worship leader standing on the platform.
Exactly right.
And you need the sound guy to be able to turn the audio up.
Yeah, exactly.
Or else the person on the platform can't be heard.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's this. I think it's a beautiful expression of being in sync and working together.
And I think that's a very important thing. We've worked so hard over this to close the gaps where there have been and redefine what our teams are responsible for and what it means to be on our team. That has its own challenges depending on how rooted you are or in a certain way of thinking and doing things. But I think that's where you have my people like myself in place that hopefully we can carry what you guys, what you and Cass want for this team. Hopefully when we walk out of our meetings, hopefully I'm carrying that to the lighting guy and to the audio guy. And so when we come into a conference situation, you don't find yourself, you and Cass aren't going, there seems to be a bit of a difference in in preferred outcome here,
right.
Or whatever the case may be. Or you'd hope that's why, again, which is why it goes back to the whole idea of needing leaders in the whole creative technology or production world, because it's not as skilled as you are. If it's not skilled in context of, you miss the point. So, the challenge has been for people like myself, even though we came through as technical people, that I've really got to adopt a leadership stance, because in terms of gathering a team together and pointing them all in the right direction, that's not a technical skill. That's a leadership skill.
Yeah, exactly right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that certainly in our church and others, there's been a hierarchy of importance And so the person on the platform is seen as more important than the person who's pushing the faders or doing monitors or whatnot. And I guess what we've tried to instill in the team, and as you know, but is that we're all bringing our part and we're all serving. And so we can't have the sound guy yelling at the worship team to turn down their guitars or something, and we can't have
the other way around.
Either. We're actually trying to achieve the same thing, which is lead the congregation towards Jesus, point them in his direction. So hopefully none of us are actually seen, but he is.
Yeah,
and we're just functioning to display his glory and not our own in any function that we might play. But
I think if we take the stance of service every time, that's a fairly good place to start. Now let's have a conversation about the mechanics. Once we understand and have taken the stance of service, it's a much easier place to start from, than trying to protect whatever it is that I feel like I'm responsible for. So.
Well, Muchiri, it's been fun chatting. I really appreciate your take on life, but also on things like burnout, things like leading teams, and even just walking through the doors that God opens, and not necessarily trying to push doors down, but just seeing what he has in it, and doing that to the best of your ability. So thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me. It's been really good.
A blessing to people.
Thank you.
So next up, we've got today's Q&A. So we're answering some of your questions. Let's jump straight into it. So next up, we've got a question. Actually, there was a couple of questions that were quite similar. One from Jesse and one from Timothy. I hope you guys hear that these similarities in these questions. One says, how do you give creatives in training responsibility without sacrificing quality? And the other question was, how do you raise up leaders or creatives while still maintaining excellence? So I guess the gist of it is, I've got Autumn Hardman here. The gist of it is, how do you keep excellence, a standard of excellence, but also bring through new people?
Gee, that's such a good question. I don't know if I have all of the answers to this, but that's an amazing question. Thanks, guys, for asking that. I hope I can do it a partial justice. It's something we deal with all the time because one of the core values of our church is that we're generational. So we're always raising up new people. We're always involving new. We have a college here. We have a great youth ministry. And so if we're not growing, if we're not bringing new people in, we're doing something wrong. The challenge with excellence in that is, how do you bring new people through and not have your standard drop? I think it's about the environment. It's about how many people you bring in. Are they well supported? What level of standard are they at? One of the key things we do say, for instance, with musicians, I serve on our weekend team. And so if someone's coming through as a musician, we would probably do one new person in the band. We wouldn't do two new players because then they're really well supported. On our team, we do two keyboard players. And so if I'm on with a brand new person, I know that ahead of time, so I can go, okay, and I kind of safeguard them. So I have most of the sounds lined up and I have a chat with them and suss out what they're confident with. And we have, I think a key part of this is relationship. As the leader, I need to actually know what their skill level is, what is their capacity, and then I can't throw them in over their head. We've got to actually safeguard them and bring them through. And so I think we, on the platform, we wouldn't put too many new people on, and we would safeguard what we give them. So we wouldn't give them the key lead role in every song. Same thing with our worship leaders. If we're bringing someone through, if it's their very first time leading, we'd probably give them a verse or a bridge, introduce them to the church so that they just have a small portion, but they're protected and safeguarded. And I think in giving people responsibility, it's pretty similar. That we set out expectations of what we need someone to do, and we introduce them to the people around them, and then we kind of do what we can to safeguard them. And I think that excellence is progressive. One of the things we love to say in training is, if I'm always doing my best, then my best today is not my best for tomorrow. My best tomorrow grows on what I learned yesterday. And so hopefully excellence is just me bringing my best at any given time. And so hopefully your team, as they keep getting rostered, their standard of excellence grows and they keep getting better. And as leaders in training, everything continues to grow. We're really careful and cautious with feedback as well. When we bring a new person through, if I know it's someone's first Sunday, I'm not going to point out all of their flaws. I'm just going to go, hey, great job, mate. And then at some point during the week, we'll catch up with him, have a chat to him about maybe 1 or 2 things max that he could improve. I'm not going to tell him everything I noticed. And we continue to work with him. And another thing that we do, if you're in a location where there's multiple services or different places, often our youth team, before we roster them on a main service, we go and observe them in youth. When sometimes they don't even know we're watching, we champion them from the back row. We'll sneak into youth and go, oh, that kid is leading worship. Wow, that's amazing. And that's a little bit our way of seeing where they're at. In their environment where they're comfortable, we can see them, observe what standard they're at, and then observe whenever they're ready to take on something new. The very last thing I'll say, I'm sorry, I've gone on for a long time, is if you think of it in context of flying airplanes, there's the little airplanes that only require, 10 hours of air pilot time to fly. And then as the airplane size increases, your level of training increases. We kind of approach that with some of our services, that sometimes there's nothing wrong that, say, Nigel's one of the only people that would play on some of our biggest platforms. It doesn't mean there's anything better than Nige than anyone else. It's actually that he's had so much flight time that he's experienced and he's equipped. And so in bringing people through, it's really important to assess maybe what their flight time is and where is appropriate for them to be playing and out working and leading for their own well-being and development as a person.
That's awesome. Well, I hope that answers your question, and I hope that you can bring through teams excellently. Well, that's it for today's episode. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to subscribe, you can do that pretty much anywhere you get podcasts. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and even YouTube. We'd also like to hear from you too. So if you have a comment, you can do that on our Instagram, which is @HillsongWCC, and we'll see you next time.